much for taking time out this morning to join us. I promise you that we've got a really power-packed session today. You know, I actually hate hyperbole, but when I was looking through the details for this webinar, I was quite awestruck. First of all, it's the 26th webinar that we have done in the past 12 to 18 months. 26 webinars, okay? So the other thing is my guests today have been so kind to give us their time, and combined between my three guests and myself, you know, we're really talking about more than 100 years of marketing experience together. So I think we will have a lot to say, and we picked people who have a very strong sense of opinion, and I think you will find the information very, very useful. Now, I consider all three of them rock stars. And, you know, frankly, for two of my guests, Rowena and Marcus, you know, having been in marketing for quite a while, I've always been in awe of their contribution in terms of creativity, the work, and what they've done with the industry. If you will notice on the slide, there are three of us who are representing AAMS, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that a little later on. But last but definitely not least is Archana, who is coming to us from MediaCom Singapore. Now, Archana works very closely with myself and our teams on huge accounts such as P&G and Shell. So again, an incredible panel, and I think I want to get the show on the road. The way we've structured this is that we will all be sharing aspects of this conversation about data and creativity. And then we will go to what I think is the climax of the session, which is a very open panel discussion where we have pulled feedback from our clients and our partners on the things that they are most concerned about with regards to that synergy between data and creativity. So let's get on the road. We want to get to know all of you a little bit. Wait, hang on. I'm going to talk about AAMS first. Next slide. So three of us here are representing AAMS, and this is an open invitation to the rest of you to join us at AAMS. AAMS was formed on 1st of November 2019 as a merger between 4As and IAS. So clearly, if you check the website, you will know it's led by experienced leaders in the industry, lots of resources available, and we invite you to come and join us to be part of this movement to make Singapore a beacon of the ad marcom experience. We currently have a drive regionally even to bring people on so that we can have a great forum for sharing best practices as well as issues that we can kind of work through together and make this industry far better and more progressive. Okay, so next slide, please. So we want to get to know all of you much better. And we always like to start with a poll. So you'll see a poll window pop up, and it's a multiple choice answer. So you can pick as many as you want. We would like to know what types of data do you use to shape your marketing campaigns? 1, customer demographics and psychographics. 2, competitor market analysis. 3, social listening. 4, online surveys, focus groups, and insights. 5, web analytics, purchase frequency, dwell time. 6, none of the above, and still trying to figure it out. Now, there's no right or wrong answer. So if all of you would take a few seconds to just sort of tick off what you currently do, it would go a long way towards helping myself and the panelists understand where each of you where the bulk of you stand. Okay, so could all of you respond to the poll? And my team in the background will tell us when most of the answers are in, and we will share. Okay, team, are we ready with the results? It popped up and popped out. Could we pop the results back on? Okay, so A few of us are still trying to figure it out. I think you found yourself in a great place today. You'll definitely find useful information. The rest of you are using customer demographics and psychographics. The bulk of you are, and I think that's sort of basic. And we'll see competitor analysis and also web analytics have surged ahead. Social listening seems like it's coming up. Online and focus groups, I think in the past would have been a larger proportion. So good to know. Thank you for participating, and let's get the show on the road. So next slide, please. So data and creativity, is it the perfect union? So when we were creating titles for this webinar, we were saying, you know, should be something like when Harry met Sally, like when the right brain met the left brain. It's sort of that sort of conversation that has many marketers in a bind. As someone who went to school in art history and math, you know, I am kind of always finding myself in the intersection, right, between these two aspects of creativity and data. Next. So currently, we have a situation where more than ever before, technology has made knowing customers so much easier. And this should actually go towards improving how marketing can be shaped for better outcomes. But yet, there's still some mystery about it. And we want to take the time today to really go through some of this. Now, I want to share with you a statistic. In 2012, only 12% of companies, large companies, had someone in the company called a CDO, or Chief Data Officer. Now, all of you can take a bet and just, you know, in your own minds. Now, in 2019, would you believe that that number has swelled to 70%? And the trajectory shows that by 2025, more than 90% of large companies will have a CDO. So we basically now need someone who knows where to get the data, how to get the data, and what to make out of that data so that the entire company can benefit. So this whole question about data has become so increasingly important. And then, you know, we have people on the creative end who, you know, when you're sort of a creative person, you're like, I don't want to look at the quantitative, you know, the quantitative stuff is kind of like, you know, it hampers my creativity. And I think that's the nature of our discussion today. Does it hamper? How can you use it? Okay. So next slide. So to just put more fire behind the whole argument that you really need to make data quite basic in your marketing arsenal. Now, McKinsey, who I had the good fortune to work with during my stint at Singtel, now really turned me on to the power of data, and I wanted to quote them. In this case, they did a study called The Most Perfect Union, and they found that there were 3 types of marketers out there. Idlers, and I don't think anyone in this room falls in that category, isolators, and integrators. And what they're basically saying here is that in their study and in their survey, if you are an integrator, you would tend to drive more than 10% annual growth for your company. And so what are these integrators? These integrators unite data and creativity. So there is a solid case for that, right? And especially now that we're coming out of a rather, you know, dark 18 months or so and coming out of there, there's no better time than now to really give a lot of thought on how to use data to really turbocharge and to, you know, chart the way forward for each of your companies and businesses. So next slide. So again on this slide, we'll see integrators in the study continuously and rigorously mine consumer insights as part of their day-to-day process. And they look at all this to improve customer experience, and this leads to better business. So now I think here I want to just call out a couple of sources of data that these integrators are using: focus groups, primary research, third-party research, customer journey analytics, advanced analytics, and artificial intelligence. And I think my panelists will touch on these aspects later on. I think by the time we get to Marcus, when he talks about his tech stack, you will see much of this in action. Okay, so at this juncture, I hope I've kind of laid the ground on where the market is going, or where our practice is going, how important data is, the growth of the CDO, right? And I want to invite now Archana from MediaCom Singapore to talk about it from her agency perspective. Archana, over to you.
Thanks, Dasheng. Hi, everyone. My name is Archana Ram, and I head the Singapore MediaCom agency. And I've been with MediaCom for over 14 years, and I've just been pretty much in media for most of my career. But when I started out, I actually started out in an advertising agency, of course, in the media department. But at that time, there were really no lines between media being data and art being creative and so on and so forth. So we actually worked very closely with creative teams to come up with concepts and ideas. So, we often think of data as being a science and creativity as being linked to art. But the truth is that if you think about it, with the evolution of and the growth of the digital space, right, with millions of data signals coming in real time from different consumers in response to creative, in response to advertising, creativity does not have to rely on gut feel or instinct or pure faith anymore. And similarly, that data, which Dasheng just talked about, the fact that creatives always say, I don't want to look at quantitative data. But data actually can power creativity. It can become absolutely brilliant and beautiful. So the question that I really want us to think about is whether, it's not just whether data and creativity can have a perfect union. It's really how data can spark, it can nurture, and it can elevate creativity. So that's what I'm going to be touching upon today. And when we think about data and creativity, there are many ways in which it can influence creativity, right? At the very basic level, if you think about it, and many of us are doing it right now, consumer signals, as I mentioned, can be used to understand what's working, not working, and then we can feed back to creative teams, and creatives can be tweaked accordingly. So this is something, for example, that we do for several clients. You can have an agile working model. But I want to just take a step forward. And I want to talk about some examples in which data can actually inform, reform, or transform creative entirely. So let me talk about the first part, right? Jade, you can move on. Okay, so when we talk about data informing creative, so what does that mean, right? Essentially, data has the power to identify patterns that we may miss. And this can happen in many ways. For example, we are talking about as a spark for a thought, data is able to do that. And I'm going to give you an example of how this can happen. The first example I want to talk about is really about when we think about the pre-data world, when we had when we used to talk about TV advertising or radio advertising in a non-digital world, messaging was quite subjective. So we used to create it, we tested it within a focus group, and then we hoped and prayed it worked, with a larger group of people. But this also meant that often we had to play quite safe. So when you look at advertising in certain categories, you'll often see that there are more similarities than differences. And that's really because at that time, we did not have many ways of testing and understanding what's working, not working. So I'm going to give an example of this brand in Australia. What they essentially did was, for the longest time, their core messaging was, dog food. Our dog food has great nutritional value. It was okay. It wasn't really doing much for them. And then they tried using NLP, or natural language processing. The player they used was Pencil. It's a player that we've also used in many ways. This essentially helps you. What that essentially does is it gives you starting points. It essentially uses AI to write content. So when they did that, one line of copy that was generated was dog food that's good enough for humans to eat, right? Seems kind of strange, nothing intuitive that creative folks would think about. But they picked that up, that idea up, and they kind of refined it and made it something like dog food good enough for me to eat. And then they took that and essentially they created a copy, and they created posts around their own employees or their own consumers trying the dog food before it actually went out to market, right? And this has become one of their best performing social posts to this day. And what it essentially says is that in this case, data or AI gave that sort of launch pad for creative to take it and really make something bigger with it. So that's what data can essentially do. It can really power and spark creativity. The other aspect of it is about reforming. Reforming is essentially refining. So sometimes ideas can start from the creative. They can come up with fantastic ideas, and data can really help sort of shape it and take it to the next level, right? And the example I want to share is work that was done by WPP in Europe. And this was for Deutsche Bahn, or the German rail. And essentially the spark was a small thought, right? From the set of planners and creative, saying, why would people travel so many miles, spend so much money to go to a destination so far away when there are so many beautiful places right here in Germany? So that was a thought, and this is a famous case. I'm sure some of you may have seen it. But this germ of the idea, so they wanted to create something around this. But then, if you were to imagine, if I have to come up with, comparative pictures of Germany and the rest of the world, and imagine a set of creative people looking through it, it's going to take months. So essentially, where data came in was in 3 different ways. Number one, in the first place, they used AI to scrub through millions of photographs from across the world and come up with the comparative images. Once this was done, then they use data to understand. They use consumer signals to understand what were people searching for. They, from where they were located and where they were looking to holiday. So once that came in, then in real time they scrubbed the flight prices, and then that was immediately converted into a social media post and served to that consumers almost real time in their social feed. So you can imagine at every point, so data came in to make the process much more efficient, much more refined, much easier, and obviously took a simple idea to a whole different level. This campaign actually generated over 10,000 personalized unique images, and it led to a 24% boost in revenue. The results speak for itself, right? So it's not just a gimmicky sort of idea, it's something that really helped them drive sales. So that's how data can, take an idea and sort of take it to a completely different level and refine and reform it. The last bit is really about transforming. And as I mentioned, we have different kinds of data. We have different ways of using data. And sometimes the most simple data that, we have been looking at for many, many years can be a spark of something really, really big. And the example I want to share with you today is for an ice cream brand in the US. And again, it slowly started making its entry into APAC, so some of you may have encountered this. The brand is Halo Top. As you can see, it was a typical ice cream brand. And when it was launched in 2011, the intent was that it was going to be a snack that could be, it's a guilt-free snack. Somebody who wants to just have something sweet could have it without the calories. That was the intent of the launch. But what was interesting is that for the first few years, it did okay, didn't really take off until about 2017, when it completely displaced Ben & Jerry's as the #1 ice cream brand in the US, right? Quite an achievement. So what happened, or what happened that led to this is essentially when they looked at their audience data, they realized that there was a significant group of people who was buying this ice cream on a daily basis. So you can imagine, this is data that I'm sure all of us are, getting every day, our audience data, our audience consumption data, but that sort of popped out. And then they dug a little deeper because they wanted to understand who in the world buys ice cream every single day. And that's what led to that brilliant insight that these were people.
Me.
So these were people who were essentially not consuming the ice cream as a snack. Oh. They were actually using it as a blend in their protein shakes. So these were super health conscious people who are going to the gym maybe 5-6 days a week, who are looking, you taking protein supplements. And because this ice cream tasted so good and it had no calories, extremely high in protein, they were using it as a blend in their protein shakes. And this is not something any marketer can actually plan for. This is something that happens, and you need to be lucky enough to recognize it and unlock the potential of this. So how did they unlock the potential? The first thing they did was they looked at their packaging. You can see on the left-hand side how it was the old world packaging, typical ice cream packaging. They said, you know what, if we have a significant group of our consumers who are going to be consuming our ice cream for protein and as protein shakes, let's go after this segment. And they put that sort of low calorie, high protein right at the center of their packaging. It also influenced how they communicated through their creative, both on social media as well as any of the other creative assets that they did. They focused on the brilliant nature of this product in sort of being a way to improve your health overall, right? So they went after that. This ended up creating a whole new category. So that is something incredible. It obviously opened up new avenues for them. And essentially that little bit of data that they looked at transformed the entire business model itself to a point where, as I mentioned, not only did they supplant Ben & Jerry's as the #1 ice cream brand in the US, they were also named 2017's one of the 25 most innovative brands by Time magazine. So it's absolutely incredible. It's data, it's incredible creativity, and they actually worked together to be able to, to transform their business. So essentially, just to wrap up my section, as I mentioned, data can work in many different ways, right? At the most basic level, it can give you simple signals to help you, tweak your creatives almost real time to make sure you're maximizing your effectiveness. But at the other end, if looked at it in the right way with an open mind, it can absolutely help you transform not just your creative, but also your entire business model, perhaps. So I just want to leave you with that data has the power. It's not something that is separate from creativity. It has the power to spark, to nurture, as well as elevate creativity.
Archana, that's a way, as we say, that's a way of leaving a sweet taste in our mouth, right? So is one of your clients bringing this product in for us in Singapore? Is it available?
It is. It's not one of our clients, but they have launched, I think, in APAC.
I see. Great. Well, look for it. Thank you so much. That was such a delicious sharing. I want to then call on my next panelist, who is a good friend, Rowena, to come and share her journey with data and creativity. Rowena, over to you.
Thank you, Dasheng. And good morning, everyone. Thank you, Archana, for really getting the ball going on this topic today of data and creativity. I guess as part of a creative agency, I wanted to share and talk to everyone about how we look at it from our lens and the relationship between the two, right? How do we leverage data and how it helps us to create what we serve to come out and do, which is effective, fresh, and smart communication. And how do we try to Dasheng talked about it in the beginning, right? How do we put the creative biases that people all feel that creative people have aside and instead work and actually use that to our benefit? And later I'm going to show you some work that really does that, and share some views. So let's start, with broadly understanding what the role of data in creativity is, right? And it can be from the lens of a creative agency. So here are, how we look at it with 3 avatars of data, if you were to say so. The first and the most important, and I think the one that means the most to us, is inspiration, right? As we all know. And it's about the ability to, garner fresh insights, have a different and sometimes a deeper understanding of the target audience, of the who, the what and the why, right? But it also helps us reframe problems and to look at a brief differently. And that's where I think that Spark is amazing, because you see a very fresh look at something. And I'm going to show you some examples where you'll see that actually it's driven by data. So the creative idea itself, the creative fuel, is actually from data, which I think is quite special because it wasn't that way in the past. And next up is validation. it's all about, we all know this, it's testing, 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 right? And it's how we use this data to validate our ideation and creation to improve. At the end of the day, it's about improving the overall effectiveness of what we are putting out there, of the communication. But, you know, there are a lot of words, right? I mean, with clients that we have, sometimes we hear of, you know, creative fatigue is perhaps a term. We hear it often, and then you'll always hear requests to, like, maybe let's refresh the creatives. So I think there is always a balance about being, you know, maybe too trigger happy sometimes and to keep refreshing, or when you decide that it's time to do it. And of course, that means you have to really look at down the funnel and the data points and the engagement points and make sure that whatever you're creating makes a difference out there, up there, and also all the way down as people move down the journey. And we'll talk a little bit about this. And Marcus has an amazing way of looking at this too, which he'll get into after this. And the third avatar of data's role is, I think, the delivery of the ads itself. And I think this is where what's really quite special and different is the relationship between a creative agency and a media agency. And it's so important from the get-go. I think it cannot be such that the media agency comes in at the end. You know, the whole process has to be that they are involved from the beginning, because they have the ability to hyper-target ads, to retarget, to sequence, and work together. We work together on the brief objectives. And then we obviously have, with the creative product, the agility to influence every step of the way. So when we are designing a piece or a campaign, it's about what you do on top, but what you design with the right trigger points all the way down to make that purchase, or to trigger that preference, or to trigger that behavior change. And that can really only happen with a really good partnership with media and creative upfront to have these discussion points. So that you get, I guess, the best impact with all the touch points below. So these are the three broad roles of data and how we see it and how we work on it as an agency. But I think to give you a bit more clarity, right? Because I mean, I know some of the thoughts were like, oh my God, like, how do you guys actually approach it? And this is a very simple way. You know, we get a client brief. One of the first things we look for is we ask, what data do you have? You know, is it audience profiles, customer behavior, consumer behavior? And then we gather our own data and we validate the brief. Often it's really important so that we are clear about the expectation of the communication. And then we dissect it again and we say, maybe we should challenge this brief, or maybe further define the challenge. Maybe the challenge that we were briefed is not the right challenge. And we have to define and maybe discover what exactly is that why. And we reframe that problem. And more often than not, by doing that, that's how we get the freshest insights, because we look at it, like we said, a different way, right? And due to some data that kind of lights that. And then, of course, I think, you know, you can have all the data, but if you actually don't talk to consumers, you don't do that tea time and listen to them and get some of those data points, you kind of like, I guess you don't get a true picture. So that we think is extremely important. And then we talked about testing and validating, which I talked about earlier, right? And that's how we take our strategic hypothesis and we test it with the target audience. And we say, you know, do you think, would you move? Will this make an impact? And that really, at that point, is the combination of data we've had all the way through, you know? And then after that, we brief our creatives, right? And when we brief our creatives, we share with them and we inspire them with this relevant data we found and these amazingly fresh insights, you know, and we brief them. But this is also the stage, like I said, when media and creative, if they've come hand in hand, we actually get really good data of media habits and possible opportunities, you know, and really quite interesting sometimes media behavior that actually can be part of these insights or maybe even form the insights. And all of this.
Let me interrupt you here, right?
Yeah,
you made a point about testing, and I think immediately people go, oh my gosh, you know, how much money is that? How much, you know, I'm going to spend on a focus group. But you know, you and I know, right? I mean, you know, like for example, at Mediacorp, we've got 2,500 people. The organizations that you work with have, people. And so sometimes actually that testing could just be as simple as an internal test, right? It's not this full-blown, study that you go to, a focus group company to get done, right? So those are the sort of things that are kind of quick to trigger, that can get you that creative insight in a much shorter cycle.
Absolutely. And nowadays, there are even tech platforms that allow you to go out in 24 hours and get the answer you want. So, there are so many options out there. Absolutely agree. And I think the important thing is to be able to test that so okay, this is a good direction. And hopefully then that whole creative output that you're putting out there, right, which is the combination of inspiration from that whole, fresh insights and the validation that we talk about the, from obviously the testing that happens, the tea time that we call it, etc. And of course, the support of data means that, okay, I'm on to something here, it's good. But it doesn't stop there, yeah? Because the most important is that you need to make sure that what you're going to put out there is effective. And I'm going to repeat this again, not just from the top of the funnel, but all the way down to drive conversion. So what is it that you can do? And I'm going to show you some examples after this. I'm going to show you 3 different examples to give you a flavor of what I mean. So, and I think that is extremely important because a lot of people or a lot of brands, they feel, okay, my job is done. I've done the big piece, everyone knows. But actually, if you don't go down and you actually go down to looking at what is that job this set out to do, right? So I'm going to try and change behavior. I'm going to try and get that purchase. So I have to look at that second part. Often the second part is actually ignored, which I think is an issue. And of course, we've all heard all these terms: A/B testing, creative refreshers, sequencing, whichever it is, targeting. But data has that role in all of it. So when you're looking at that delivery role, it's important to think through those points. And as I said, optimization is something that is everyone practices, we practice it, but it's really to make it better, to see what are the tweaks that needed to be done. It's not to say, okay, let's change completely, and I think that's important. Okay, so enough of this theory. Let's show you some work about how it's in practice. Okay, so I picked out 3 examples of what we've done. And really, I want to show you how we put it into practice. So the first one is a creative idea we did for Great Eastern that is literally built on data, okay? It's data from Google searches, and it showed us what some of the most poignant questions, we did this a year ago, Singaporeans were asking. And what we did is we turned that into this. And this is really that first funnel part that we're talking about. Jade, can you play this, please? If you've seen it, this is obviously what we did on the top, right? And there's that ability to use those data points from those questions, those searches, to do things like search specific ad targeting. You can do that, right? And then I want to show you something on the other end of the spectrum of how we use data literally as a creative fuel, right? And this one is really, it was for a brief done about a year plus ago, and it was about how do you show the possibilities of 5G in a relatable way to a younger segment, a younger audience. And we wanted to coincide it with the launch of, one of the Apple phones, right? So the whole idea is, from a creative fuel point of view, what can tech do for the future in a way that can excite everyone. So obviously we used certain things that are quite cool, dance, certain things that were trending. So I'm just going to play that. And again, this is built on data.
빠르게 한다는 건 어떤 의미일까요?
A dance challenge from the future? This is crazy.
우리는 수백 개 영상을 분석했고 모든 걸 즉흥적인 동작들로 연결시켰어요.
The idea that AI can choreograph a dance is amazing.
빠르게 한다는 건 절대 따라가는 게 아니에요. 가장 먼저 한다는 거죠.
This stuff is lit.
Yeah, and we can skip the next slide. And I think what I want to do is, yes, I want to show you, and this is different because I want you to look at how here's a content piece, and very cleverly what we tried to do is you can see the whole range of content to go all the way down the funnel that was developed to improve engagement all the way down, bite-sized content. So let's just watch this. I just wanted to demonstrate the fact that when you go down the funnel, how there is the ability to, with one piece of content, be able to do enough to get that engagement going all the way down. So I think I just wanted to close with the point that I think data and creativity at this world that we are in today are two sides of the same coin. One is mediocre without the other. And I'm going to pass you on to Marcus. Actually, no, to Dasheng. You're going to introduce Marcus.
Okay.
That's right. Sorry about that. Yes.
Marcus. Now, introducing Marcus, I don't think we need to say very much. The brains behind what some of the most memorable creative in the last couple of years. So, Marcus, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I think thanks to Rowena for the very forward-thinking kind of roadmap in terms of, I think we really need more creative agencies that have that kind of mindset. And the relationship between data and creativity is really a much discussed one. And you can see from my two other panelists and what Dasheng has shared, there's really no perfect way to do it. And it's just depending on your objective, your purpose, etc. And as marketers, that's where I represent. We should be conversion focused. So we are very focused on driving down the conversion funnel. So it's not just about the beautiful creative, but it's really the effectiveness and driving that whole conversion. So as a brief introduction before the panel discussion, I will bring you through my point of view with data and of our creative journey. So using the marketing conversion funnel, of course, this looks like a triangle, but just putting that frame in your mind as we talk you through the whole relationship from the top all the way to the bottom funnel. So at Income, we are very much focused on engagement. So it's not a matter of whether it's a long form or a short form, but I mean, our key objective and the purpose, especially in the life insurance space, is about nurturing the customer and driving engagement. And that also allows us to take that piece of creative outside of the media space and giving it to the advisors, set for the advisors to share with their clients so that they can have that conversation. So it's really about the point of view and the engagement that we want to drive. So as we talk about the top funnel and those firms that you've seen, like the best gift, the worst parents, and all those stuff, actually at that point of that top funnel, very little data is being used in the creation of our firms here. But of course, there's still data, okay, because insights and observation is still a form of data. But however, there's a big difference between insights and observation. So I'm going to give you another visual form in your mind. You know, we are all very familiar with the iceberg concept, you know, where the top 10% is conscious and the bottom 90% is unconscious. So I would say that the top 10% is observation. The bottom 90% is actually consciousness. But at the bottom 90%, I then subdivide it to multiple percentages. And the sweet spot for us is at about 60 to 70. When it gets too deep in terms of the subconscious, and when you use that kind of data point or that kind of insights to develop your creative, it will become too abstract and people don't really know what you're talking about. But then if you then, the sweet spot for me is about 70%, 80, 70, 60% point. That's where that is in their subconscious. It's very easily bring up to the consciousness, and that is something that then spark conversation quite well. Okay, and then we move into activation. Activation, this is where I find the deepest relationship between data and creativity. Okay, and to look at the whole entire customer journey is really important in the whole activation of the whole creative piece and the media. So we have to plan the campaign according to customer journey, and we need to chart different paths. And at different path point, we apply different creative execution. Say, for example, where you have long form film, people don't really watch the story to the end. Yeah, you will say, oh yeah, it's 4 minutes, 5 minutes, people don't, but it's storytelling, right? But then for 30 seconds, what can you say? So it's not about that format again. It's about then how you then further dissect down those conversation or those messages that you're trying to drive down. I can do a cut down to 15 seconds to make sure that after you have seen my film, I retarget you with my end messaging so you get on to that. And depending on how they interact with your creative, you need to then further develop things like static displays, blog articles, so that then you get more signals, etc. And then further down, driving them down the conversion funnel. So depending on conversion objective, it could be lead generation, it could be a sale. Right. So to me, the funnel, there's two types. Not everything you have to go really long journey. You know, some things can be really straightforward, like travel insurance for us. So I see funnels as two types. Like one is a long funnel and the other is a shorter funnel. So on a shorter form where, you know, like when we talk about travel insurance, that's where we then don't have to tell you that, oh, you need travel insurance. It is something that we can say, oh yeah, this is, we then can use a lot more data and use a lot more data point to drive creative execution, to then drive it down the conversion funnel. And usually it's about 1, 2 to 3 steps at max. And I will have an example for you as a case study that we did with Google, the YouTube Director Mix, where we created a base set of creative. Then we use the whole search data. I think Rowena shared something about with G, our competitor. She used that to develop her creative, but we then go further down to drive conversion with that. And we really see an incremental sales. So from a few base creative using search data, and then we then further populate that to more than 500 scenarios. So after I covered the last part of the, Jake, can you go back to the slide again? After I touch on the last part of evaluation attribution, then we'll play the case study for you before I give you a behind the scene of our tech stack and how we got onto that journey. Okay, so for evaluation and attribution, that's really important because that's where you really get your money. So data allows you to get real-time data of a campaign, and that's where you make adjustments, etc. So especially when you run a campaign, it is not just, okay, after you develop creative, you put it on and you go to sleep. there's a lot of things that you need to do at the moment that happens, especially on the digital front. You need to look at, okay, is the media working for you? If it's not working, what happened? Do you want to change the headlines, etc.? So there's some rooms for you to make some adjustment and your media investment accordingly. So that's how it really works. And the other thing about data is that you can then attribute the source of the data, which means you can then you can prove to the management that your campaign is working, because now with data, you can do attribution. Okay, I will show you a little bit of how, but most of you should understand based on what I've seen on the survey. And data can also help you save money. Okay, so for example, with media investment, you could then look at what time is the best time to invest more and to bid for your audience. And with that, you can reduce your cost per acquisition and your return on advertising spend. So those are very important, because otherwise you may not have enough money to support and to drive down the conversion. So those are the two matrices we look at, especially if you're in the business of e-commerce. Okay, so with that, before I move on to the behind the scenes of the wonderful complicated tech stack, Vijay, maybe you play the video.
It's challenging to get people excited about something as mundane as travel insurance, which is why Singapore insurance company Income chose a fresh approach to stand out in the cluttered and promo-driven travel insurance industry. Since traveling without insurance is a game of chance, Income wanted to remind people to play it safe. Taking on the style of an 8-bit adventure game, we created a dynamic 6-second pre-roll video campaign that told customized stories of what could go wrong on holiday. Each video told a different story. We were able to show a potential holiday misadventure that would be relevant to every person's travel search on Google and YouTube. But personalizing every single video is complex and expensive to produce. So, how could they optimize creative output? Enter YouTube Director Mix, a video mass customization tool which makes it easy for advertisers to create infinite versions of a base video. Using multiple creative elements, it makes each version a separate YouTube ad. Here's how it all worked. Searching for a flight on Google to hang out on Sydney's beaches? You'll be served a misadventure of a missed flight to Sydney. Watching free skiing videos on YouTube before that Japan holiday? You'll be served this misadventure of a ski mishap. Love spicy Bangkok street food? You'll be served this misadventure of food poisoning. With over 500 creative variations of misadventures queued by your online travel research, Income made sure that when it comes to your adventures out there, they can help you play it safe.
Okay, next up, I will show you the wonderful tech stack that we have in Income. And the first slide is a basic one. That's how we started. We actually started our journey about 4 to 5 years ago. We used to be really unfashionable, really old school, but it takes time to build. But interestingly, I think as you get along, it's really going to be very exciting and simple. So it may seem like a lot of tech tools involved here, but what I really suggest to anyone that's here who haven't started, or but even if you have started, if you are not familiar with tools, to get yourself familiar with it, because this is the new way of going to market, any way of marketing. So I suggest you start with attribution and tracking tools like Google Analytics or Google Analytics 360. GA is free. Of course, the GA 360 is where you need to pay. And then, of course, the whole marketing cloud where you start your EDM journey and also the planning of the customer journey. So not everything is about huge media investment, but it is something that is really required. It is just imagine that as getting a golden goose. Okay, a golden goose that lays, instead of laying golden eggs, it lays data for you. Okay, those are really important, because the key is to really start, and trust me, once you start, you cannot stop, because it's just like really building a Lego block. You will somehow figure out what else you need to add on, but that is really going to transform your whole way you do marketing. And so you go to the next
question later. I will get to that question.
No problem. So if you go to the next slide, this is now after 4 or 5 years, this is what we have become. So it gets a lot more complicated, but we really move from data collection, just really collecting more and more data to build the different audiences. We have built almost 200 audiences in GA itself, but along the way, then that's where we add on stuff, and it's not that crazily expensive, but I think it's a key to convince your management that why you need those tools, because they don't see you as a revenue generator, but as long as you generate revenue, that is not a problem. So we have now since moved on from data collection and to now data manipulation with CDP, where we can then drive, we do more profiling, and because we have first party data, we start to be very granular in terms of how we what kind of data we collect for our customers and really understand them, and all the way even now trying to drive offline data and bringing them into the whole segmentation and profiling. And then that allow us to really do personalization, and at some point hyper personalization, but that is the nirvana. So you need to have the vision in your mind, the whole nirvana, that what is the end state you want to get into as you build on, because at some point you need to then get whatever tools you add on. There's tons of tools in the market. You need to make sure that they have native connectors for all the out-of-box solution. Okay, so if you can't remember anything that I mentioned earlier, but 3 things that you just recall. Okay, the first of all is in terms of the iceberg concept to distill insights, the 10-90% sweet spot at about 70. That's where it really helps you in using data to develop insights. And second point, the lower you get down the funnel, the deeper the relationship with data. And the third thing is about the golden goose. So always start off with having that golden goose, but please don't kill it, because no matter what, that is the key base for them or for the goose to lay data for you, and data is the new goal, right? So with that, thank you very much, and we can proceed on to the panel.
Marcus, you know, that slide just makes, I think when we first saw it, we were like, oh my God, we're blown away. Like, how much data, how much data does Marcus have to read every day, and how much does he need to then analyze? So I want to go to our first question, and I think that kind of latches on to what Marcus had just shared. So the first question really is, there really is a vast amount of data and consumer insights on the market. So where do you start? And what are the questions that brands and agencies need to ask when confronted by tons of data? I guess the long and short of this is, what do you really need and what's a nice to have? Who would like to go? Maybe Archana?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I think the question is, I mean, of course, there is tons of data, like you said, right? And it's available everywhere. The question is, where do we start really depends on what we want to achieve. I think it goes back to the fundamentals of what are the business goals, right? Certain businesses at the launching stage may want just to drive awareness. In today's world of collapse, path to purchases, we may want to do multiple things. But I think from that starting point, if we start from there, then you can already narrow it down to, look, these are, for instance, as Marcus was talking about, the end of the funnel, right? If it is really about, I am hyper focused on, for me, the last sales are really critical. Then it is about going after the data that you are able to get from on the rich consumer data that will help you hyper target them, that will help you reach out and improve efficiency, reduce your cost. So I think it goes back to the fundamental business questions. But this is where I think, that which we really encourage, right? The tripartite alliance, the agency, the creative agency, the media agency, and the clients to really work together, because each of us probably has one part of the puzzle, but if you were to bring it together, it's going to help us figure out what kind of data is required.
Archana, just to interject this point, I really think this is a marketer's role to do it. Okay, because I have tried from China to Malaysia to Singapore. If you ask the agencies to do it on their own, it's not going to happen.
No, exactly. I agree. It cannot, like I said, it cannot be done by the agencies alone. It has to be that sort of alliance between us, because each of us, like I said, has a piece of the puzzle, right? And you could unlock certain things that if you're just viewing it only from business versus only from media, you'll not be able to see the other side. So it has to be done in partnership. In identifying what we want to go after and what can be defined such that we can go after the data that's going to help us understand it better.
On that note, I want to go to the next question. And I know there's someone I really want to ask this question to. So the next question I had was, it feels like we're becoming very data dependent. And, with Marcus's last slide where he's got this tech stack, from hell, I would say. There's so many elements in it. Now, is the next generation less prepared to make gut decisions and it's heading towards paralysis by analysis? Now, Marcus, if you look back at your career, like over the last couple of years, and with the tech stack that you now have you become very data dependent, or how have you kept your gut in check?
That's why I mentioned earlier, with the funnel, it depends on, you need to be very clear of where that relationship gets deeper as you go down the funnel. But for me, it's like the gut is still quite important in terms of the insights and, like we talk about having clear lenses to look at the whole to drive insights, to deliver that pure insights, to create that wonderful creative, right? So at that point of time, you don't use a lot of data, but it is really important to use your gut. But for data, it's really good for activation. So you just need to be very clear of that. Then you won't fall into this place, right? Because there's no way, from my point of view, to 100% use data to make creative. That's not possible. Okay, you try, but you will be a very boring and what we call okay noted type of campaign. There's tons of it now. It's not just coming from a TV box. You open up a Facebook or open up TikTok, anything, everywhere is advertising. So it's about how you capture the attention. If you just use data alone to make that wonderful creative, then I would say good luck to you.
Yeah. No, I mean, agree, absolutely agree. And I think just adding on, I think data needs to be used to help maybe get to that top where you talk about the fresh insight and all of that. And I think that's special. But when you go down, absolutely agree with what Marcus and Archana are saying, because whatever we do, like all your A/B testing and all of that, they allow us to optimize our creative output, maybe change formats a little bit, do things like that. But it's not completely change something. It's not revolutionize something. It's just to make it more efficient, make it better. And I think it's really sometimes tweaking the message, etc. But if you're clear in your gut, this is the way to go based on all of the thinking up front, the tea time chats you have, this is going to trigger a response, then you need to go with your gut. You need to go with your gut.
And gut is anyway informed by all the data points that we observe and ingest every day. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ro, just out of curiosity, have you ever launched a campaign that the data was telling you something, but you and the client really were very brave and just went a whole different direction?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have, and I think sometimes also because of the market that we are in, sometimes you have a short time to do something, right? So if you have something you have that's opportunistic, that is time sensitive, and you want to be able to, so let's say you've done all this work and you say, okay, I want to launch this particular thing this way, and I think that's the right way. But something happens. I mean, we all know, right? I mean, we are in this world, sometimes something happens, and an opportunity gets thrown and you realize, oh man, if I launch this now, there is going to be an upside, but maybe I need to pivot and change, and change my messaging to be able to cater to this. And I think, and sometimes I think the one thing I wanted to add on to the discussion, sometimes we realize maybe we start with social and learn, and we see what the response is like with social first. And then after that, we take it big.
Okay.
And that's the market we're in, right? You can test and learn and then basically go out in a big way.
Can I take that thought onto my next question? I love how you are. I haven't rehearsed this, so it's kind of nice that it's all connecting. So basically what you're talking about in gist is about something contextual, right? So I wanted to know, with all the types of data that it's so much available in the last 2 to 5 years. Now, how has the use of data such as contextual, behavioral, targeting, and trends analysis changed over time in terms of marketing communications? So this one, maybe Marcus or Ro?
I mean, Marcus, you want to go for this? Because I think pretty much to me, what's changed is it's going back to what Archana kicked this off with, right? Which is that if you look at your business challenge and you're able to see for example, this is the outcome I want, and to make this outcome, and you look and you understand the whole purchase journey, and you say, okay, maybe to make this a lot better, I need to improve customer experience, or to make this a lot better, I need to effect change this way. And then that is the kind of data you need to go in and say, okay, I need to look at what I can get. I need to work with the media agency. And as Marcus said, I think there's no person who can lead this better than the client, because it's the client that knows where they're trying to take the business in the next 5 years, and they can drive this. So for me, the point about the kind of data, the trend analysis, I mean, what's amazing is now there's abundance of data out there. There is so much of an abundance of data. So to me, what's different is when you decide what is that job you need to do, or what is that business problem or that business objective, then you look at, do you need to look at engagement data, behavioral data, attitudinal data, all of that, and you see what you can do. So I mean, I don't know, I feel like it goes back to Archana's point in the beginning. And as Marcus said, it needs to be a client who drives this to say, okay, these are all my key objectives. These are my key deliverables. Now, based on that, how can you guys help me all the way through the funnel to make it a lot more effective? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think from my point of view is that now with so much data, you need to be even ever clearer in terms of your objective and purpose and what's the jobs to be done. Then you can decide what kind of data you need. Either is it to improve your cost per acquisition, improve ROAS, or is it to build brand awareness, etc. Because every campaign has a different objective. And also when I say depending on your product, whether it is something that needs a lot more nurturing like insurance, or is something that is straightforward. You are selling ice cream, you probably don't have to, do so much song and dance, just get to the point and convert it. But it is about using the data to deliver that piece of communication at the right time. When I'm thinking about having a tub of ice cream, this is the moment that pops up, how often that happens. And then that is where you will convert me because I'm considered in market as a customer. So data is wonderful. There's really a lot of things you have. Don't be afraid that there's too many. In fact, too many is good. But I have to say that in a tripartite work is really important. For the client, especially you have first party data, you have very rich data, right? And that you need to, and then that is the data that the agencies do not have, right? And then how are you going to use that data well, then to inspire the agency to make that creative works for you, right? And the whole customer journey planning is your responsibility as a marketer. You can't expect to ask the creative agency or the media agency to really chart out that for you, but you need to chart that yourself. Then okay, orchestrate what kind of creative to in each part of the journey. At the same time, what kind of media strategy to deploy to make sure that gets delivered.
Yeah, and actually,
Dasheng, if I can just add, right, Marcus, you made a very good point, right? And the data that sits with the marketers today has gotten even more important, right? Especially when we're talking about in a few years when we're talking about cookieless world, right? And as media agencies, we're trying to figure out what kind of signals we're going to start picking up. So, for example, at MediaCom Group M side, we've already started building the ecosystem support collection of data that is not dependent on the cookie anymore. But in such a world, the first party data becomes all the more critical. So the contextual data, etc., is slowly moving out. We are getting so deterministic in how we are approaching it. That's when the marketer data becomes so critical, which especially when cross-referenced with the other kinds of data that we have at our end, it becomes a lot more potent. Again, just to reinforce, I think what the others have said, we have to start with the objective. Don't get bogged down by data. There are a lot of tools to help us sort through the data. I called out a couple of AI engines that help us sort through data in many different ways, right? Start from there. Look at the most valuable data you have is that sort of first party data, and then see how you can supplement it and then grow it. That's essentially it.
And I wanted to sort of give the perspective from a media owner, right? And Mediacorp having all these platforms. Some of the best campaigns that I've worked on this year have used client first party data combined with our first party data and our audience insights. So therefore what we're saying is that, nobody owns all the data, but when all 3 or 4 parties, in this case, I want to join the party, okay, guys? The media owner wants to join the party, and we have a tremendous amount of data. And as well, and as Archana put forward, we're also in the process of, actually, we're well along in the process of collecting first party data, and that will actually form a series of webinars in the coming months as well, because as that topic becomes hotter and hotter. So now, on to my very last question, and I know some of you are pressed for time. My very last question is, we've established that the union of data and creativity is important. Now, how do brands and agencies work together to find the balance? I think we also had, a question in the Q&A, which says, how do you convince clients who refuse to listen to what the data shows? Now, Ro, maybe you want to talk about this one.
For me, I think the world that we live in today, the way to convince a client is really, because the data will tell, right, is to do a test and learn, to do small things where, you know, you're able to show them that, okay, let's try, do it in a small way first, in a controlled environment if we can, see that it triggers some kind of a response, and based on that, we take it, you know. And I think we can even afford to sometimes do some of these things and experiment, you know, and invest in that if we believe very strongly in something. So I feel the best way is to test and learn, and you can do it in small ways. Just like how we talked about earlier, Dasheng, we talked about how you can get research in 24 hours. The point is, you can even do test and learn in small ways. And most people like to do that now, even media platforms too. Yeah.
Right.
I think for this one, right, and this is something that we've been experimenting with for the past few years, that whole media and creative agencies working together has become so much more critical, right? We used to talk about the world where we start with the audience, create the creative, then say, okay, this is my creative, go distribute it on media, right? It has sort of flipped its head because we start with the audience insights, all of that. Ideally, you should figure out, how do I want to reach, or what's the best way to reach this audience, right? It could be different platforms. And then that can work along with the creative agency to figure out, and Marcus touched upon the fact that you can have a long form creative, you can have short form creative. It's not that there is no role for long form, absolutely not. And if you think about the creative that Rowena shared, the Star Hub creative, which I've seen many times in the cinema, which is fantastic, right? It's a fantastic place to place it because you have a captive audience. Right. So you want to put the right creative on the right platform. And that's when that whole, the partnership between the media and creative agency becomes so critical. So it should not be that, you create the creative and then say, go disseminate. It should be like, hey, what are the ways in which we can reach consumers? And therefore, how can we adapt our messaging to suit us? I think that a lot of us are doing it. And I think that's the most critical point.
Right. Marcus, any closing thoughts?
Again, there's no perfect balance on this thing, but I think to that question where, from the audience asking about, if how do you agencies convince a client with data? I know that I'm not convinced with the data. First of all, I think the agency need to ask what kind of data are you showing the client? I don't think any client will reject data, but sometimes just that the data is very frivolous and it doesn't represent the universe, and that's where you reject it. And that's most of the time that happens. But in fact, my point of view is that agencies, they don't use enough data. They don't understand enough of the whole customer journey in terms of the whole execution. And know what Rowena presented is, to me, I feel that it's a very forward thinking. I think all agencies should look at it, have a sense of it, and try to understand that whole customer engagement journey. Try to talk to the media agency, or maybe recruit people from there. I don't know, so that you can then form an entire view. And I will be very impressed with an agency that can show me, okay, at this point of time, okay, this is what the creative I'm going to create for you. But this is the top funnel all the way down to the bottom funnel. But at this moment, it's still very much relying on the client, on the marketer to drive that conversation. But the moment when this flips, I would say that it will be amazing.
Right. I want to say one thing, and this is to everyone in the audience. Please do not go to your agency or your media partner and just say, I'm looking for ROI. ROI has become such the bad word for me over the past year, because ROI is really quite a many-faceted creature. And from what Marcus is saying, what are you trying to drive, and what Archana was also trying to put forward, right? Decide what that business outcome is, and that's the ROI, and that is the ROI. But even that ROI could be across many different components. So I want to just leave all of you with this last thought. Jade? Okay, the economy is coming back, right? Clearly, even with the numbers that we're seeing every day, we as a media owner know that most of the major brands who work with us are hot on the go. So, there's no better time than now, when everyone's in recovery mode, to really start thinking about your internal resources, whether you need a tech stack. And we look at Marcus's tech stack and we're like, oh, that's amazing, but that doesn't have to be the be all and end all. So I really want to encourage you to activate this perfect union between creativity and data. And we know, all of us in this room I think we're such advocates of that intimate relationship between these two aspects, because it really will drive business success, better creative, and greater resonance with your target audience, right? So on that note, any last words from any of you? No, we're all good?
All good.
Stay safe.
It was fun. Yeah, stay safe.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, Marcus. Thank you so much, Ro. Thank you so much,
Thank
Archana,
you.
for time to join us. Like we've been saying in the chat, we will have a recording of this posted on the website. So any of you who want to go back and look at Marcus's tech stack can do so on the slides and just learn a little bit more. So thank you all for attending. Thank you to my panelists. Stay safe and really have a good well, for many of you, it would be Q4. Have a great Q4 ahead. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tasha.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.